So now you're all motivated and raring to go. Let's just take a look at the big picture, the environment that we're working in. We want to make games in Unreal Engine using C++, and we want to learn as much C++ as necessary to do a great job at that. So how does this work? So firstly, Unreal Engine is the star of the show here at the top of the diagram. Now, if you didn't want to write C++, if you just wanted to use Blueprint, and we have a separate course for that, then you could just have Unreal Engine running on your file system. That's what I'm using this folder as an example of, and you'd be ready to go. But when it comes to writing C++, there is another layer in the middle we need to insert. Now, if you're on Windows, the standard way to do this would be to use Visual Studio IDE, a big download, like 4 or 5 gigabytes of download, but that comes with everything you need to both write your code and compile your code. On macOS, your go-to option used to be going to Xcode, which would write C++ code, a little bit tricky. We'll talk about that in a second. But it would also compile your code, and it would be pretty simple. If you're on Linux, well, then life is more difficult, but we're going to cater to Linux in this course. Now, in discovering the option on Linux actually turns out to be a better option for both the platforms, in my opinion. So on Linux, one of your options is to use something like Visual Studio Code, which isn't the same as Visual Studio. It's an open, faster, lighter weight version of Visual Studio without a compiler built into it. And then the C++ icon there is to represent that you would need to set up C++ independently yourself. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to show in the diagram. The point is that Visual Studio itself is very big to download and is very slow to help you auto-complete your code. Xcode is very poor for writing C++, and again is a big download. So why don't we discard those things altogether and just focus on the cross-platform solution of Visual Studio Code plus the appropriate compiler for your system. So that's what we're going to do. Now, just a little bit of further information. Why Visual Studio Code? Well, it's fast. It's free, genuinely free, regardless of the terms. Visual Studio Community and others actually have some restrictions on them, and it's very familiar. If you do want to follow along in Visual Studio, the full version, you won't have any trouble, I don't think. It's supported properly in Unreal since version 4.18. I'll put a link to that, to the blog post from Unreal saying that they now fully support Visual Studio Code. It's going to be the same on Windows, Mac, and Linux, exactly the same once we're inside Visual Studio Code. So it's nice and homogeneous or homogeneous. I'm not sure which way you say that. And it's about 10 times smaller to download than the full Visual Studio Suite. And finally, it's like a buffet. If Visual Studio is like a set meal, then Visual Studio Code is like a buffet. You start very small and you keep going back for what you need in terms of things called extensions. So that's why we're using Visual Studio Code. I'm going to run through as if we're going to use Visual Studio Code through this section. And if you really want to use the full Visual Studio or Xcode at the end of the section, it's a simple add-on to switch over to those. All right, but I'd love you to give Visual Studio Code a try. All right, what we need to do now is get in Unreal Engine downloading, because that is going to take ages. So, by the way, if you're on Linux, just skip this. We're going to build the engine later on. Wait till we get to that bit. There isn't a download for Unreal Engine on Linux. You have to make the engine yourself. But if you're on Mac or PC, I want you to get the engine downloading. So get yourself an Unreal or an Epic Games account. So I'm logged in already. If you're not, then just sign up, sign in. And you just want to click download. That'll download an installer here for your platform. So in my case, Epic Games Installer. I'm going to open that installer. And over here on Windows, it's a very standard installation. You just click install and go through as you would with any other program. The other things you may see during your Windows install are a bunch of Windows Defender dialogues popping up about allowing access. Of course, you're going to need to do that. You may also see, depending on what you've already had installed in the past, a question about installing the .NET framework. We are going to need to do that, so just click download and install the .NET framework, and then we'll all be on the same page. All right, so we get the Epic Games Launcher. This is the key. I'm going to replace any Epic Games Launcher I may already have on my system. You should probably do the same. Maybe you've tried this in the past and you've already got an old Epic Games Launcher. Let's have the latest Epic Games Launcher on our system. And then I'm going to show you how that Epic Games Launcher actually works. So there's a few layers to installing Unreal Engine. You get the Epic Games Launcher. That you may already have from playing Fortnite or another game that uses the Epic Games Launcher. And then inside that launcher, you'll get the option to manage your versions of Unreal Engine. You can have actually more than one version of Unreal Engine, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to open up the Epic Games Launcher that has just downloaded, and we'll take a quick look at it. Now, I'm doing all of my work in this course on Mac, but as you can see, I'm also catering to Linux and to Windows, but I can't actually run Unreal Engine inside Windows or Linux because of the limitations of my virtual machine. So I'll do all of the actual running of the engine inside macOS for you. All right, so when you try and open the launcher, we're getting this. We're getting an update happening to the launcher itself now. So that's fine. That's pretty typical for these types of installation systems. So we just wait for that to happen for a moment. Skibbity-bippity, skibbity-bippidoo. All right, then, once that dialog disappears, it's going to sign you into your Epic Games account. You may have to put your details in. It may advertise some games at you. Slime Rancher coming up here. Actually, a really good game. Surprisingly fun and surprisingly deep game. If there's some issues with fixing file associations, may as well let it do it. And then what we want to do is go over to the Library tab here. The Library tab, you may already have a version of the engine installed. The key is to make sure we've got an up-to-date version. So I'm going to install 4.21.2 in this instance, and you just click Install. It's going to ask where. I'm going to use the default. And it's also, by the way, going to give you a little drop down next to any existing versions that allows you to remove them. Up to you if you want to do that if you're running short on disk space. But just make sure you've got 4.21 installed. Now, it doesn't have to be 4.21.2, it can be 4.21 point anything, but I do suggest you follow along in the course in 4.21. We don't want you to have difficulties with versions. So we'll just be letting 4.21 download there in the background, and I'd love you to just carry on with the course. Leave your computer running while this is initializing and downloading, and then carry on watching the course because I'll keep you entertained while that's happening. So, awesome. Congratulations getting this far. Again, if you're on Linux, I'm going to show you how to build the engine on Linux, and see you soon.